Okay, Steve, when you're ready, you can go ahead and introduce yourself.
Well, I'm Steve Prevette. I've been fortunate to be model railroading and operations for 50 years now. I gave a shout out early to Ken Nelson, a junior high school teacher who let us descend upon his layout in Scotia, New York. He was also a D&H fireman, so I learned in later years a lot about the Delaware and Hudson, which my railroad's based upon, actually the Ontario Western, but I assume it's part of Derico, which was a holding company that had the Delaware and Hudson and the Erie Lackawanna, and it picked up the Ontario and Western, which somehow survived 1970 in my fiction. But this is not about my railroad. In fact, Robin Riley is here. This is about something Robin asked me to help him with. Let me get into this. This is car forwarding with something called wheel reports. Let's So if we move on to the slideshow here, car forwarding, we do, and we all know this in the OPSIG, we have to have something to do with our freight cars. Now, I will admit, I had the honor of visiting John Armstrong's Canandaigua Southern and operated on it. I said, well, what do I do with these cars? I don't see any paperwork. I don't think I said that, but the answer was, well, just when you get to a town, drop off whatever cars you want and pick up whatever you want. It's fine with me. I'm like, this is Mr. John Armstrong? Well, so I think we generally want to go beyond that, but even Witt Towers did that. So there's nothing wrong with that. Those are some big names in model railroading. If you just want to drop cars where you want a box car at the coal mine, hey, that's fine. Or we can end up with, I personally do tack on car. I've written some articles about that. Of course, we've got 2 and 4 cycle car cards. I've seen 8 cycle car cards, believe it or not. Switch list, we got, JMRI. I didn't list it, but we even have people who put RFIDs on their cars. So now, a few months ago, there was quite the lively discussion about trying to read reporting marks on cars, and especially in N scale. And I'm doing the Rust Belt in 1970. You can't read my reporting marks. So, thus, I have these big honking thumbtacks in the top of the car. But there's an easy option in the middle, which is 40 years old, believe it or not. This Jim Hediger, who just passed away recently, I've got a slide about that, wrote a thing almost exactly 40 years ago on wheel reports for easy operation. And there's a few pictures here, which I'll blow up in a slide. But this is a rather old idea, but I am updating it with Excel Spreadsheet. Now, my background includes an operations research degree. Interestingly enough, I got to talk with an operations analyst from the Union Pacific during Dixie Rail. So we were doing all the geeky number stuff, and Robin's like, what are they talking about? Why are they carrying on about Poisson distributions and variation and all that? So we get into this sort of thing. So I've kind of updated it with Excel spreadsheet is the short part of the story. Now, Jim did say on a prototype railroad, they have waybills. And he said on some railroads have what they call the wheel report that's kind of an overview of the whole train. So since he wanted to emphasize the train consist rather than the individual car data, he used the wheel report as the name of it. Now, my comments are actually when I read this in 1984 and I just started shifting from HO to N scale, I had my N scale 3 foot by 6 railroad, which is now 20 foot by 30 foot. It was like, well, this sounds like a pretty good idea. And it just wasn't realistic enough for me personally. So I went to the full blown tack on cars generated by a Markov chain in a Excel spreadsheet, which I wrote about. So if some of you are going, this is too damn simple, I ain't doing it, I understand. But I think you'll see some benefits to it. And this is just, marking that Jim passed away on February the 9th. I think Model Railroader this month had a nice article about him. And this is one of his 750 articles he wrote. So hopefully a good memoriam to him. So this is kind of what I tried here. And this is what would be a very compressed wheel report because my Cadosia, New York and Burn Hills, New York actually have a lot more sidings and I have a lot more car types. But to make it readable on the slide, you would have a card like this and you give it to the yard master in Mayfield and say, make me up a train of, let's see, it looks like 5 box cars, 2 reefers, 3 gondolas, a flat car, and 3 tank cars. And then he would give this card to the person operating that local. And when they got to Cadosia, they go, okay, I drop a box cart at Sea Otter, Charles Otter. I built that while in Monterey. My wife loves sea otters. So that's one pun on the layout is I have a sea otter plant. So that plant, which has 3 sidings, get a boxcar, a gun, and 2 tank cars. The team track, we get 3 boxcars and a flat car. So I can make reasonable cars go to the place. But which boxcar of the 5 in the train it is, doesn't matter. Just put a boxcar there. And usually the rule was if you put out a boxcar, if there's a boxcar at the Sea Otter plant, then pick it up. So it was a fairly simple approach. And then you can make up several of these cards, like he suggested having 10 cards numbered 0 to 9. And if the day of the month it was Friday the 13th, well, you'd use card number 3 because that's the last digit in the date. Worked pretty well. Now, what I've seen some people use this, and one of the problems that really irks me is that the yard, then the only way to sort a yard is I need a track of boxcars, I need a track of reefers, I need a track of tank cars. So when I have the card that says I need 5 boxcars, I just pull 5 boxcars from the boxcar track. That's what makes the most sense as a yard master, but it's not terribly realistic. And what do you do with a stage train? Now, I think 40 years ago, we didn't have so much staging, so that wasn't a big deal then. And what happens when these cars are brought back to the yard? What does the yard do them? Do they put the boxcars in the boxcar track, the reefers in the reefer track? Don't know. So here's my take on this. Now, I have to admit, this is very techie geeky, an Excel spreadsheet. I've helped Robin with it, and I'll just say up front, if you guys are interested in this, I'm more than happy to help anybody develop this. I'm pseudo-retired now. I teach for Southern Illinois University online. I teach a stats class, amazingly enough, and I'm happy to diddle around in Excel. If you tell me your industry list and what types of car goes where and what the size of the sidings are, I'd be happy to do this. There is a way to build random numbers in Excel, but what I've documented for Robin is how to build the train, be it in staging or in a classification yard, where the train delivers the cars to, what to pick up, and I just default to whatever's there, basically. And if the train returns the yard rather than staging, I've got the directions of what does the yard do with the cars. So, Robin, wave your hand. There's Robin. And John is here, and John Parker, and he's one of the crew members there too. All right, so Robin's a couple pictures here. These are a little old. He's got a lot more scenery in. Double track main line. It's kind of a through loop, and there's staging at the top, staging at the bottom. There's a couple interchanges, which are good, a Rock Island interchange and a Wabash interchange. There's 4 different towns and 1 classification yard. One eastbound, 1 northbound, 1 southbound yard. And this is N scale, same as mine. So again, hard to read reporting marks. Okay, so this is the meat of it. Now, this is what a train crew would get. So this, we haven't really named the trains yet. So this is pretty generic. First southbound through train, we may make it more classy. And it's the second train we run. It happens to page 1 of 2 of instructions. This is how it's staged. And we're starting to separate the staging instructions out, but this says make up, and these are all random numbers, by the way. I'll show you the Excel spreadsheet and how it changes numbers. But it says make up a train of 11 cars in southbound Maine. It says the first block of cars at the front of the train shall have 2 flats and gons in the first block, 1 covered hopper in the first block, and 4 boxcars in the first block. So the first 7 cars are specified. Then the second block of cars shall have an empty coal and 3 tank cars. So as you're staging, this is pretty easy. Grab them up from other trains. And there's also an instruction, I'll show you in the Excel spreadsheet, says what track do you make it up on? Well, it's actually southbound Maine and staging, and what the locomotive is. Pretty straightforward, eh? Y'all? I worked in Canada and South Carolina, so I interchangeably say y'all and out of habit. Okay. Now, this is an alternative version. This is changing the day, and I actually change a thing that generates random numbers, and this is exactly the same car, but notice numbers are different. Now it says 12 cars, and it says 1 flat and gone, 1 covered hopper, 4 box cars, and just any old car you want to put in it. You got a super depressed center flat car, throw it in. You know, we all have those oddball cars that just don't fall in much of a category. And now this time it says, notice it says date is 4. The previous card, I believe, said date was 3. So this has the capability to generate very quickly, without you having to figure it out, once you've got all these weighting factors, 9 sets of cards. So far, we're only got set 3 working right now. We're just testing it all out, and there's tweaks in process. But for example, this would be used on the 4th, the 14th, and 24th. So if Robin's operating session was on the 24th, it would be date 4, and we'd use all the date 4 cards. So this gives you some variety. I will admit, I'll pick on Robin a little, is he was developing the op session, he would write a script out, and there every time you brought a car in off the it was the Rock Island, you'd pull into Keokuk and it said, put the purple car at the freight house. And Robin's saying, no, it was the mill, I think he's mouthing at me. But yes, it was the same instruction every time. You started getting used to, okay, where's that purple car I put out? So this at least gives you difference, gets a little bit of randomness to it, which those of us who are statisticians just love randomness. Okay, so this is behind the scenes. And I'll show more detail to those who really want to see it. But this has so I set this up to say, okay, reefers that are coming into the yard, he's got a fruit loading plant. And we had a big conversation on this in the car drive from Atlanta last night. But basically, my logic is all reefers go to Clarksville. So I did put in a min of 0, an average or a mean of 1 car, and a max of 3. And there's a little random generator it goes to. It gets column B. That's what the B is for. And what's a standard deviation is how much variation is there. Now, this time it came out and said, because based on the very low random number, that no reefers would be going to Clarksville. It's coming in from this train. But I do have some tank cars, and we have a big chemical processing plant, DuPont. Robin's not. Okay, that must be right. In Fort Madison. So this time, actually, it's a fairly high random number. So it went and it says, okay, put 3 cars in there. So that's kind of where these come from. Now, you'll notice the flats and the gons, the covered hoppers, the loaded coals don't say specifically, but because the coal mines in Keokuk, all empty coals go to Keokuk. And again, there's this catch-all of average. So this is my generator behind the scene. And so that train, which we were just talking about, comes out with 11 cars. And then there's another set of random numbers that says, okay, we're going to drop 6. It's from 6 to 9 to 11. Now, so here's where it gets interesting. So we, after we have it staged, this is the second card. It says deep. Now, this is to the train crew. So you depart with 11 cars. You arrive at the Hannibal yard because this is a through train. It's running from staging to staging, but it's dropping and picking up a cut at the main yard, which is Hannibal at the southbound. So we're going to drop off that last cut. We're going to drop off 6 cars in the yard arrival track. We're going to pick up everything that's in the St. Louis track. And then it says, give this card to the yard master. So the yard master knows what to do with it. And we have we call it a Form 19. It's not really a formal Form 19. Boy, I said that 10 times fast. A formal Form 19. It's not one of those, but it says basically, yeah, leave Burlington, pass this town, arrive at Hannibal, service your engine, do whatever the bill of lading says, then get your train and head through another 2 towns and get to St. Louis. Now, you hand this off to the Hannibal yard, which is usually me. And so these cars that they gave me, which was 6, it says that take the 3 tanks and put them in the Fort Madison track, take the 1 empty coal to the Keokuk track. Now, the other stuff, it just says, because we don't know necessarily what order the person staged in, whatever the next car is, I throw in the Hannibal Industries track, and that car after that goes to Fort Madison. Now, as it works out on Robin's layout, each of these destinations, like Hannibal Industries, will take anything because the RIP track is in Hannibal Yard. So if I have a car type that doesn't go to any industry, doesn't make any sense, it just says put the other cars on the RIP track. Hey, you can always put something on the RIP track. And going to Fort Madison, that train also drops cars at the interchange for the Rock Island. And of course, any car can go to the interchange. So there's a basically a safety valve here that says for these destinations, I don't have to worry about what the car type is, because there's always a safety valve of no matter how strange the car is. Here's a pickle car. Where's the pickle car go? Give it to the Rock Island. They'll do something with it. Okay, so here's another this is actually the Form 19. So this is what the train crew also gets along with the bill of lading, which they gave to the yard. So this gives them how to complete their run. So depart Burlington southbound, past Fort Madison, go to Hannibal Yard. And here it says this is the drop the specified cars in the bill of lading and pick up the cars on the St. Louis track not to exceed 16 cars in the train. Service a locomotive. He always has this very nice, if you got a steam locomotive, there's a water tank, you push the button, he goes glub, 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 and finally all full. It's a neat effect, and the spout comes down too. It's a very nice model. It gives you something kind of interactive to do instead of like the diesel, like, oh, I'm pretending they're putting sand in the dome. And I reassemble the train and move on, and I depart Hannibal Yard southbound past Clarksville, which is next town, terminate back on the southbound main as it works out. So it went out of the southbound main, it goes back to the southbound main. Very easy. Now, this is a little bit more interesting. This is a local train. So this is, instead of being made up in staging, this is a local train made up in the Hannibal Yard. So their instruction is southbound yard, make up a train of all cars that have accumulated on the Clarksville track. Now, those are going to definitely be some reefers for the fruit plant. There's going to be some flats and some box cars for the lumber yard, which are the two industries there. And everything else just goes to St. Louis. Up to a total of 12 cars. Add the engine caboose, and then there's a specification for which engine, and give all these cards to train 10. It's the 10th train. So as I said, it's very basic right now. We're just numbered the trains in sequence. And then the train crew departs from Hannibal Yard, and you pull into Clarksville tracks, which are both trailing point, and it says all reefers go to fruit loading. Okay. If you got any flats and gons, it goes to the lumber yard. If you got a box car, it goes to the lumber car. Now, as a safety valve, if there wasn't a box car for some reason, it just says if it's not available, just skip that line. And it says pick up all the cars on the tracks. Now, I could have gotten really refined and said, well, we'll only pick up 2 cars or whatever, but we're just going fairly simplistic here and saying whatever was there when you got there, pick it up, and put any reefers you got in fruit loading, put a flat or gondola in the lumber yard, and put a box car and put a box car in the lumber yard track, proceed southbound and terminate in St. Louis staging. And then this is the Form 19 that just basically, now we got to worry about the wrong main and that. So we've just got kind of a specification. Robin has signals, so we don't really need much for paperwork, except this is helpful to give the train crew that they've got engine 265, DCC channel 19, and away you go. Now, why don't you unmute Robin, since I gave you the very quick and dirty here, but let's Robin say a few things. Eric, hello? There we go. Robin, you're on.
Yes, thank you, gentlemen. I'm Robin Riley, and I own this railroad. And the impetus for something relatively simplistic came about from my initial experiences going from never being operated on a railroad to operating on some fairly large, what seemed to me to be complicated operating schemes. I wanted to create something that really was designed for a new guy who never operated at all, maybe not even had a throttle in his hand, but could get a flavor for operations, experience the basic elements of operations in a zero stress, focus on fun setting. And so I basically tried to design something that I understood And if I understood it, it was going to be pretty basic. And so this is the evolution of that. It's still very focused towards inexperienced operators, but hopefully there's enough complexity for even someone who has a fair amount of experience to enjoy the day. But without having to carry cards in your hand, or like Steve said, look at the actual numbers on the cars. So it's a focus on fun. We ran the same type of scheme for several years, but only with one scenario. And I felt it started to get predictable, since the trains were always the same and the cars went to the same places. So Steve came up with the random generator. So now we probably have, with meeting once a month, nobody will ever remember one sequence versus another, and it will always have something new for the operators. So again, geared to a newbie, but hopefully even someone with 50 years of experience can have a good time.
Well, thanks, Robin. So as we transition into the nuts and bolts, and I may lose a few of my statistics students here, but this is the behind the scenes. Now, it starts off with a setting page where you put what the day is, and actually this number goes to random number generator, makes a whole new set of numbers. I do everything in Excel spreadsheet, even my own diagrams. So I even gave Robin a schematic of the railroad. I made all his town maps in Excel. It's pretty easy. One of the nuts and bolts things here is his staging, which is in a separate room. And I made this map for him to say, okay, these are where all the trains are. And like when that Hannibal to St. Louis local comes in, we've got the returning train here. So at some point we do a little fiddling and we take that locomotive and put it on the return train and run that back. So this gives a complete list, which is actually tied to, you'll notice this, I have engine assignments. So this DCC 31 is the Zephyr. If we ever change the engine assignment, I can actually, if I typed into cell D13 and sequence an engine assignment, it pops magically into there. You can do things like that in Excel, is linked to other spreadsheets, which is pretty handy. Staging instructions, we decided, and I showed that to you as the page, but we decided to accumulate all the staging instructions together. Now, for example, on this card, the reason that is blank is that there's logic in the Through Freight South card that says if it said 0 cars, it just leaves it blank. I don't have a good way to compress the lines, so that's good there. But we even have, since you've got a coal mine, we got a whole instruction on, well, where do you put the loaded coal hoppers, where you put the empty coal hoppers. My own railroad, it takes a long time to get in. I think Tony Custer wrote about this, interestingly speaking, on his Allegheny Midland, that yes, he would run his empty coal trains back to the mines and run the loads back to staging. If you're a coal mining railroad, it takes a while. We even have his roster. I made up, and I got the old, I like this because I got the old veteran typewriter font. So this thing looks like somebody typed it out on a form. But this kind of gives the same sequence. You know, we don't have a schedule at the moment. We just have a sequence, but it says, okay, what happens? And like at this, it says the Zephyr, which you only have one set. So it runs south. Once it gets back to staging, somebody like Robin needs to go back out to the garage and turn the train around so it can come back as the northbound staging. I mean, the northbound Zephyr. Nice big, since I do yards, I like good instructions. So this is a whole set of instructions that, okay, the Zephyr passes through the main. This is something I wrote after I did all the, as we see the nuts and bolts coming. So here comes one of the nuts and bolts cards. So this is the Keokuk switcher, moving 2 loaded cars. So that number 2 comes from, I have to shrink this down. I'm just going to quickly go through this. I'm willing to send it. I'm sure with Robin's permission, I'm willing to send this to anybody. But like it says, if K5 is 0, just leave it alone. So right over there, we see that it's the random number generator. I don't know why it won't stay there. So this random number comes out from a master spreadsheet of random numbers. And here it takes the max minus the min, and this is how you simulate normal random variables. I won't go beyond that, but this actually will take it down to the nearest integer. So there's a lot of formulas in there, but once you've got it, it's pretty well ready to go. So that generates and says it's a 2. Now, for some reason, this random number came in as a 0.7. You'll notice it would become a 4. And actually, the other numbers adjust a little bit. Let me Control Z that. So when I save it, so this is all dependent on what the random number was. We have our instructions. This is at first, since it's passenger train, I've got the note. These forms remain the same every day. But here is the through freight south I showed you, and here's all the calculations that go with it. Let me pick a different one here just to go into. We have like the Wabash transfer. This is fairly simple. This comes out of staging. I said the total cars should be a minimum of 8, a maximum of 12, and an average that happens to be in the middle at 10. This gives us a chance, if we find out there's too many cars coming in from the Wabash transfer, too few, I can tweak on the min and the max and the mean, the average. For everybody used to pass Stats 101, their favorite class, I'm sure. And the standard deviation for the variability, this came out with, from that fairly high random number, there should be 12 cars on the train. And just a couple special things as well. How many box cars should I say go to Fort Madison? Well, I could have none, 1, or 2. And empty hoppers going to the Keokuk track to be delivered to the mines is 1, 2, or 4. And that's for the Wabash transfer that comes into Hannibal Yard. And the stuff coming in also, then I've got over here the same weighting factors. We're going to St. Louis, Burlington, Keokuk, and Clarksville. And there's a little balance check up here that says, okay, if you're dropping off 11 cars, which is what that's calculating, this thing 3, 5, 7, yes, adds up to 11 cars. So there's all sorts of making sure that all the numbers add up. But here's where the yard gets the Wabash transfer. So the yard says the empty hopper always goes to Keokuk, but whatever the other 10 cars, whatever order they're in, and just declare one end or the other. The first 2 cars to the St. Louis track, the next car to the Burlington track. 2 cars to the Keokuk track, 2 cars to the Clarksville track, and 4 cars to Hannibal Industries happen to be the result for this day. So all these are each set up, but once you have one set up, it's not too bad. We have some coal trains. We also have some tank car trains to handle the big DuPont plant in Hannibal. Did want to at least show, yes, here's Hannibal Industries. It gets really interested. So all this stuff that goes to Hannibal Industry track, various locations, locomotive servicing, can get boxcars, covered hoppers, and GONs for materials. These are their weighting factors, a minimum of 0 cars, a max of 2, but kind of keeping to the low side. So I put the average at 1/2. And so this will generate how many cars should go where. Note those are zeros. So that's why these first 3 lines are blank, because I put in a nice little if the cell is 0, don't do anything. But this gives the person running the Hannibal Industrial Switcher, I need to put a loaded coal car to the steam loco servicing, 2 boxcars to the team track, a flat or a GON. I kind of use those interchangeably. I wanted to simplify things. Usually flats and GONs, somebody will correct me, can use basically, open load type of stuff. 2 boxcars to the freight house, a reefer to the freight house, 3 boxcars to the Railway Express. There's a pier that can get some flat cars and GONs, and then 2 boxcars to the fruit plant. And then it says when you come back, well, those are your set outs. So yeah, if you got any more reefers that weren't called for up there, put them on the fruit track. loaded cars, coal cars to the pier, and anything that just didn't end up any place, throw in the rip track. If you don't have enough cars to fulfill one of those orders, leave it unfilled. And then to close out the loop, when this is given to the Hannibal switcher, all empty coal cars to go to Keokuk because that's where the mine is. 2 of the reefers, because we don't want to overload the Clarksville fruit loading track. They really won't hold more than 2 reefers. And that'd be about all they'd be shipping out in a day. So 2 reefers there. And then whatever's left over after you switch out the empty hopper cars and the 2 reefers, the first car in your cut goes to Clarksville, to Keokuk, to Wabash, to St. Louis. Anything else that's left over after that goes to the Burlington track. So I have enough slop in this that it will, everybody gets to go someplace. Now this is kind of where I planned this. This is what I would kind of need to know is like the destination grouping, what are the spots, what's the type of cars that you can take. These are the type of cars that I accounted for. If you have a case where there's this, in fact, I was helping a guy who has ore cars being transferred from a mine to a couple of finishing plants, then there might be an ore car type. This thing is obviously pretty flexible, but this is kind of my working notes for, okay, how many cars can go where, was just my notes. One thing I do like to do, this is just getting into general ops planning, is Robin's layout is very tight aisles. I'm sure nobody else has aisles as tight as Robin. Haha. I know that's not true. I've been in some narrow aisles. So I did try to keep the where the operators were, and I still wasn't successful completely, but at least keeping things a little bit so the bodies weren't interfering with each other. And I did set up a basic sequence here with some time estimates and the locomotives. Now, this is my random number table. I'm not using the random number function. So I'm actually using, what is this, a linear non-congruential random number generator. It's rather old-fashioned, but it works. And it goes to that very first setting page, picks up whatever that number was, and then every random number just comes off the previous random number. So if I go to the first page, I change the random number, this whole table changes and generates all new sheets. Okay, I won't make you suffer through any more operations research statistics, but yeah, there's the settings page. And that's about it for the formal presentation. Let me go finish the PowerPoint though. There's a little bit there. Yeah, never say you're done and say, oops, I forgot something. Sorry about that. Bad thing. Never do that as a speaker. Never, ever, ever, ever. Okay, so this was where we cut over to the Excel file saying there's paperwork for 16 trains. We can get 10 variations per train. I got everything in that package for them, including the dispatcher sequence and all that. So concluding slide. I hope you found this interesting. Robin certainly said what his desires were. At one point, we had 3 layouts in the group. My rather detailed 400 cars, everything's got a thumbtack. And another guy in the group was Don Barnes, and he built a very exacting Baltimore, Ohio model, which was 36 foot by 78 foot. He gave me the 1949 freight train directory for the B&O, and I was actually able to replicate, condensed a bit, the whole sequence on his layout. But as Robin kind of alludes to, you don't want to be a newbie operator and show up at Don's layout with 20 operators and go, oh God, I'm just overloaded. So Robin has a good point about how do you learn to operate. I will say this is kind of like the Reader's Digest crossword puzzle. I'll just give a shout out for the Dixie rail I just went to. There's a railroad I love, but boy, you sweat profusely at this railroad. It is high traffic. The radio is just always going with OS reports. It is high stress, but it's fun. Now, another railroad I was at was like, oh, this is very relaxing. I was a yard master. The pace was kind of slow, but that was good. After being on the Norfolk and Western, it was like, oh, this is pretty relaxing. This is fun. So it's nice to have this spectrum from anywhere from the Reader's Digest crossword puzzle to the New York Times. I love Excel. I did 28 years of work for nuclear weapons sites, mostly using Excel spreadsheet. So I do that pretty profusely. Don't mind helping some folks with the Excel implementation, or I will just give you the file and you can play with it. I do have a website for my railroad, bhbf.weebly.com, and there is my email. I'll leave that slide up for the moment, but Eric, I'm ready for questions.
All right. Steve, again, thanks for presenting. There are a couple comments in the chat about how boxcars were used to transport coal in Western Canada. The boxcars are okay at coal mines.
Yeah.
Obviously, boxcars also transported grain a lot of
Yes.
different places.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, at times, they put paper doors for grain. Try to load lumber into a boxcar. Loads of fun, I was told.
John Parker said they transported clay in boxcars.
Mm-hmm. With up the roof hatches. But I would probably want to have a separate car type for kaolin boxcars if that was the case.
Sure. Well, I would imagine even for grain, because.
Mm-hmm.
All right, there's a question in here. Have you used this with brand new operators who have never used this method before, and were they able to operate it without a lot of problems?
Yes. Robin?
Am I muted or no?
No,
you're on, Robin. You're live.
Yes, we actually encourage guys who have never ran a train to come to this layout. And because there's enough of a narrative built into the plan, you really can get an idea very quickly and very easily about what it is you're supposed to do, because you can read it in almost sentence format. And so we had two guests come down to look at this system from another area of South Carolina who wanted to implement operations on their railroad. They had never done that. Not only were they operating within a half an hour, but they brought the concept back to their own railroads and have a basis for designing and implementing an operating system for their own railroad, because they felt this was so easy to understand.
Right. I will plead guilty to, they came and operated my railroad and I thought everything went well, and unbeknownst to me, they're like, oh my God.
Right. So it was encouraging in that it fulfilled their need, being totally new to operations. And it makes, again, this is supposed to be fun. That's almost rule number one on my layout. And this does the job. This does the job.
Right. Cal says, I've been working on using Excel to generate waybills and switch lists.
Mm-hmm.
Let me do this. I think that's the last of the questions, but I've changed the security. So if you want to ask your question, just unmute yourself and you can ask Steve. We'll leave it open for a few minutes.
Steve, I might contact you by email later just to show you what I've been working on. So.
Okay. Happy to compare notes. Yeah. As I say, even I understand my thumbtack on car is kind of maybe too rudimentary for some folks too. So, but we have a lot of fun with it. And actually, 2 of the 3 layouts in Atlanta I operated on were marker on car. So there are folks out there that do marker on car. But yes, I'd be happy to look at what you got and compare notes.
What I'm trying to do is have the waybills sort of, as I call, virtual waybills. So I get my control freak bit in, and then just create switch lists, because that's what I find most people like to have just a one piece of paper, not a bunch of car cards.
Right. And you should be able to do that in Excel. Yes, I agree.
And and I'm supposedly at our divisional meet in June, I'm supposed to be giving a clinic on it. So if that goes okay, I might contact Eric and do one of these sessions.
Good, good.
And there's a question about, is there a practical limit on the number of car types on the system, limiting the number of lines on the switch list?
Well, for me, just printed on a bigger piece of paper. We had at one point, I think we've been simplifying, but there's one train that gets 4 sheets of well, they're like 4x6 cards. But one train does get cards 1 of 4, 2 of 4, 3 of 4, and 4 of 4. So, you know, if you want that many card types, you know, it's doable. I mean, my own program for my thumbtacks has 10 different kinds of cards, and my spreadsheet will hand up to 20 types. I've done, you know, stuff for folks. So, I mean, as long as you're willing to carry that much paper with you, yeah, you can have, you know, you could have 40-foot boxcars versus 50-foot boxcars versus this is one with special handling in them. I mean, I do separate, for example, my home road boxcars from just generic boxcars, so that the home road cars tend to do more stuff online, and, you know, offline cars tend to go back to offline. So, I mean, yes, you can definitely have innumerable number of car types. I think it would just be, how hard is it? Like, if I've got to find a 40-foot cushion, well, not a 40, I don't think a 40-foot has a cushion frame, but, you know, if I'm looking for some really wild combination, I need a 50-foot box car with a cushion frame that has handling for God knows what in it. I might have only one of those on the layout. It might take a little while to find it. So there is, I think, more of a practical limitation on how much detail do you want.
All right. See if we got anything else here.
Hey, Eric, I was wondering if I can share something with Stephen and Rob, prototypical paperwork you might get a kick out of. I can share my screen.
Oh,
Yeah, go ahead.
why not?
Steve, you may have to stop sharing
Oh,
first.
I'm sorry. Yes, I will hit the stop share here. There.
Okay. You guys can see this. This is from Canadian Pacific in Saskatoon, which is Kel's backyard. So my dad's brother worked for CPR in the yards in here. But here's kind of what you're talking about. Here's some instructions, and basically like a wheel report is exactly what you're talking about.
Yep.
And it's just this instructions pick up so many of these toppers, watt toppers, 3 lime, 3 empty grains, and here's what you do with them. So
Yeah.
What's a sparger?
Sparger is something used for cleaning out, I think.
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah, next to
But
loadout, like yeah.
Yeah, you could easily go a step further and generate that right out of Excel spreadsheet if you had a standard format, which it looks like it is.
Yeah,
that
yeah,
would not be hard to do.
Yeah, and this is what the prototype did for Saskatoon around all the mines and stuff.
And notice the old font. I mean, you got to get, if you really want to do this right, you got to get, you know, search for, I have the veteran typewriter font. This looks like an old teletype font, I believe.
Yeah.
Well,
exactly.
the thing is, that's if you look on the right side, that's green bar paper.
Okay.
See the,
Yeah,
the tractor feed holes.
Yeah.
I like
exactly. Yeah. So yeah, it's just interesting stuff you find.
Yes. I should look at the chat here myself, I guess.
I think that's everything that. I think
Okay, practical limit. Yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah, somebody, Jim Moore comments about building an industrial themed shelf layout. He's been working with 4-cycle waybills. This seems to be, well, you could use this on a shelf layout, though. I think if you got a small shelf layout with not many spots, you probably want to get in a level of detail of, yes, I can read the boxcar number and whatnot. But there's, if you really go back to John Allen's Time Saver, he had basically one car of each type, and you put boxcar to this track and reefer to that track. So, hey, John Allen's Time Saver, which I actually operated on many years ago, was just put this car type to here. Because there's only like 5 cars on the layout, so you just need 5 different car types. It depends on the level of detail you want, but I bet for a small shelf layout, you probably do want to go to switch list or 4-cycle waybills. Yes. I see I used the wheel report to create the switch list. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Yeah. From William Berg. That's kind of interesting. Oh, he just posted a picture. Is there a way to share screen on that there?
I don't know what he's sharing yet.
Well,
Yeah.
he just posted a graphic in the chat.
Liam, if you've got the image, it might be easier just to do a screen share.
Yeah.
I can do that if you'd like.
Why not?
It's just a 2-dimensional grid of car types and industries. All my industries are in one city, and then I just use that whatever's in the yard to create the switch list. And if the suitable car type isn't in the yard, then I start assigning cars that are parked at industries. Okay, just move it from this industry to that industry. And then, of course, if there's anything in those spurs, then those are pickups.
Yep. So many variations.
I'm actually more interested at the blue. What is that? A car pick there?
That's an uncoupling pick. Yeah, I've seen those.
Is that 3D printed?
No, they're just commercially available.
Yeah.
I think Rick's makes them.
Okay.
Yeah, the little clips up there at the top are great for sticking in your pocket.
Yep.
Or clipping to your clipboard.
Right.
They work really good.
Clip it in your pocket and leave, right?
Oh, they're cheap, so you bring extras.
Yeah. Yeah, we just use plain skewers work just fine in N scale. I'm not seeing anything else in the chat.
Nope, I don't think so.
Anybody want to hop in with a comment or a question? I guess we got 10 minutes before we should call it an evening.
Yeah, any other questions? Like I said, just unmute yourself or type it in the chat. And we'll see what. And if not, then we'll say.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I noticed that so the example used random number generators in Excel.
Yes.
Does anybody have experience using other sorts of random number generators, or maybe more traditional like dice?
Yes.
Basically like a war game style.
Well, one thing I do when I'm staging my trains is I have some special dice. Like I have a 1 to 6 die. I have one I've painted out some numbers, so it's got it goes 0, 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 4. And so on my NE 84 and 87, I roll a 1 to 6 die and a 0 to 4 die, and that many cars are through, and then everything else is drop at Mayfield Yard. So I do supplement my random number generator with some, I want to get the blocking there. So NE 84 and 87 went from Washington, D.C. to Portland, Maine. I have them going on my O&W remnant and dropping cars at Mayfield Yard. So I'm using dice to say, well, how many cars should be dropped? And then I go to the random number generator in Excel. I once at a nuclear plant, they were trying to figure out how to randomly do verifications of lockout tagouts. And I said, well, you could roll dice every time you sign a tagout. And if you got like a 2 or a 3, then you send that out to be audited. And they were like, oh, the government will accuse us of gambling with safety then. So we can't use dice. You got to program us a random number generator on the computer. We can't roll dice. So it was like, okay, how much time and money are we spending for me to write a random number generator? But okay, fine. Your government tax dollars at work. So yes, definitely I do some dice rolling myself. And I will admit, I've been thinking about over the years, but never done it, is, of course, I have a specific time on the fast clock that a train emerges from, say, the Lehigh Valley. Well, transfer runs, I'm sure, never arrived on the the railroad they're delivering to at an exact time. You probably should have a random function that says, well, tonight, the Lehigh Valley, roll a die once the clock hits and go, well, okay, you got to roll like, a 7 or less for the train to come out, and you roll every 5 minutes. So, that would, but I think that would get a little silly. but you know, we probably don't have enough randomness sometimes in our model railroading.
If there's a go on YouTube, but if you search for Ops Buddy,
Yeah.
there's a guy there who's using like Dungeons and Dragons type guy
Yeah.
to determine various things. He's also working a bit with Excel spreadsheets as well, but he doesn't like random number generators. He prefers his 20-sided.
Yes. Yes, I could give you my operations research lesson for several hours on what type of random number generators work and don't. And no random number generator is really random. As you saw, there was actually formulas that generated the next number. So it was very deterministic given the last number, but they appear to be random and they're good enough for running a model railroad.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, so there definitely are people. Actually, the Ops Buddy YouTube video is worthwhile watching. I actually used it for
right. And certainly the guys on the real railroad have to, you know, I was talking with the UP ops researcher, and yes, in order to do their simulations, they've got to have random number generators, so they got to be good ones. And it's called Monte Carlo analysis. You actually, you know, run 1 million replications of a certain simulation and say, hey, you know, what's the distribution of the time it takes for the train to get from A to B? I mean, we just eat that stuff up as ops researchers. I actually went to my queuing theory instructor at Naval Postgraduate School with, how do I simulate this on a model railroad? And she actually helped me. And I gave a lecture at 2004, I think it was, in Seattle, the clinic on statistics and model railroading. And I'm proud to say I had standing room only. Must have been nothing else going on. And it was 100+ people. Oh, well.
All righty. Well, again, Steve, thanks so much for presenting and taking everybody's questions. And we're going to stop the recording.